Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into something we all crave, especially in those fresh new relationships.
Ooh, I know this one. Trust. Right.
Bingo! It's like the magic glue, isn't it? It can either make a relationship soar or send it crashing down.
Totally. And sometimes it feels like we jump in head first, all excited and butterflies in our stomach, without really understanding what trust even means in this new dynamic.
It's like we're building this amazing house, but forget to lay a solid foundation first. So get this, we're drawing inspiration from a podcast episode all about, you guessed it, building trust. And let me tell you, it was packed with insights, especially about things like consistency, communication, vulnerability, even forgiveness.
Wow, forgiveness too, that's a biggie.
Oh yeah, it gets deep. Ready for some serious aha moments? Because we're about to unpack it all.
I'm all ears.
All right, so first up, consistency. It's like what came to my mind was this image of laying bricks one by one to build a super strong foundation.
Ah, I see where you're going with this. You can't just slap on a fancy roof and call it a day. You need that solid base.
Exactly. And the episode gave this perfect example. Imagine you promise to grab your partner's dry cleaning after work.
Okay, seems simple enough.
Right. But following through on that promise, that's huge GE. It's like saying, hey, you can rely on me even for the little
It's like
things.
proving you're dependable, not just with grand gestures, but those everyday actions.
Totally. And on a deeper level, it shows your partner that you respect their time and their needs.
You're basically saying their needs matter to you.
Yes. Which
Oh.
then paves the way for that open, honest communication.
Oh, communication. I feel like that's a whole deep dive in itself.
It totally is. But they emphasized it's not just surface level stuff, it's about going deeper, being vulnerable.
Ooh, vulnerability. I feel like a lot of people shy away from that word.
Right. It can feel scary. But think of it like this, you're letting your partner see the real you, imperfections and all.
It's like taking off a mask and finally being able to breathe.
Love that analogy.
Mm.
But here's the catch, the episode also warned about vulnerability without honesty.
Oh, that's like building a house on sand. It's bound to collapse.
Right. They were adamant that honesty, even when it's tough, is non-negotiable. Like, think about it. Would you rather hear a difficult truth up front or uncover a lie down the road?
Hmm, good point. Even those little white lies can chip away at trust over time.
Exactly. It's like that saying, honesty may not always be easy, but it's always right. And being upfront about what you want right from the start, well, that saves a lot of heartache later on.
Absolutely. Like, imagine one person is looking for a long-term commitment while the other is more casual. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Total mismatch. It's like starting a road trip with two different maps.
You'll end up lost and frustrated.
Huh?
So yeah, being clear about your intentions lets both people decide if they're truly on the same path.
And here's something I found fascinating. They talked about how honesty can be contagious.
Contagious. Like a yawn.
Kind of. It's like when one person is open and genuine, it creates this safe space for the other to be the same.
Ah, I get it. So it becomes this positive feedback loop where trust just keeps growing.
Exactly. Both people feel seen, heard, and respected.
And that brings us to, drumroll please, empathy.
Yes. Because we all come into relationships with our own baggage, right? Our past experiences that shape how we see the world.
Like everyone's wearing invisible glasses that color their perception.
So true. And this episode, they were big on putting yourself in your partner's shoes, trying to see things from their point of view, even when it's different from yours.
Because it's not about always agreeing, right? It's about making an effort to understand where they're coming from.
And that requires patience because building genuine empathy takes time.
It's like learning a new language. You're bound to stumble at first, but you keep practicing until you can truly understand each other.
Exactly. And just like building a house, trust doesn't happen overnight. There will be moments that test its strength, which is why we need those final two ingredients.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. What are they?
Boundaries and forgiveness. And that's where we'll pick things up in part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about how important empathy is, right? Like really trying to understand where our partner is coming from.
Absolutely. But even with all the empathy in the world, you know there are going to be bumps in the road, moments that really put that trust to the test.
Totally. And that's where boundaries come in, right? It's funny because the episode we're talking about really challenged this idea that boundaries are all about shutting people out.
It's like, nope, stay away from me. I've got these huge walls up.
Exactly. But the episode, it framed boundaries as self-respect. You know, it's about protecting your own well-being while still being in a relationship.
It's like saying, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with.
And this is where I need you to respect my limits.
Right. And there's so many different kinds of boundaries, too.
Oh yeah, for sure. There are like emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, even boundaries around like how we spend our time and energy.
And the key is to communicate those boundaries clearly and respectfully. It's like we're negotiating a treaty, but instead of countries, it's about our own needs in the relationship.
And just like any good treaty, it needs constant communication.
Oh, yeah, you got to keep checking in, making adjustments as things change and evolve.
And that's where that saying comes in, you know? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Because by setting those boundaries early on, you're preventing misunderstandings.
And resentments from piling up down the road.
Exactly. And when those boundaries are respected, it actually strengthens the trust.
Because it shows you both value each other's needs.
You're creating that safe space to thrive in the relationship.
So important. But okay, even with the best intentions, even with clear boundaries, sometimes trust just gets broken.
Yeah, it happens. We're human. We make mistakes.
And sometimes we end up hurting each other, even if we don't mean to.
And that's where that last piece comes in, forgiveness. The episode made this amazing point about forgiveness not being about saying, oh, it's okay, what you did was fine.
It's so not about letting people off the hook.
Right. It's about letting go of the resentment, that anger that can just eat away at a relationship.
Because holding on to that stuff, it just ends up hurting you more than anyone.
They even described forgiveness as an act of trust itself.
Whoa, I didn't think of it that way.
Because when you forgive someone, you're basically saying, hey, I believe there's good in you.
And I trust that you'll learn from this and grow.
Exactly. It's recognizing that we're all works in progress, you know. We mess up, we learn, we hopefully do better next time.
It's like choosing to move forward together instead of being stuck in the past.
And just like trust, forgiveness doesn't happen overnight.
It's a process, right? It takes time, maybe some tough conversations along the way.
But the episode really emphasized that holding on to that anger, that bitterness, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It really highlights how forgiveness is ultimately about taking care of yourself
It's like choosing to set yourself free from all that negativity.
so you can move forward lighter and more connected than before.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Consistency, communication, vulnerability, boundaries, forgiveness. It's like we've gathered all the ingredients for this amazing recipe.
But now comes the fun part, right?
Yeah.
Actually putting it all into practice and seeing how it works in real life.
And that's what we'll be diving into in part 3 of our deep dive. So stay tuned. Welcome back. It's the final stretch of our deep dive into trust, especially in those new relationships.
I feel like we've covered so much. It's like we've built this whole toolkit.
Right. Consistency, communication, vulnerability, boundaries, even forgiveness. But now the question is, how do we actually UC all this?
How do we take all these amazing ingredients
Yeah.
and whip up something delicious? And the episode we're talking about, it actually did a great job of walking us through some real-life scenarios.
Oh, that's helpful. Okay, so let's say you're, I don't know, a couple months into dating someone new.
That exciting honeymoon phase.
Totally. But then something happens. Maybe a miscommunication or like an expectation that wasn't met, even a small betrayal of trust.
Oof, those can sting. What do you do in that situation?
Well, this is where all those tools we've been talking about, they become so important. The episode really emphasized open and honest communication. Like, don't just sweep things under the rug.
That never ends well.
Right. Instead, approach your partner with that vulnerability, that empathy we talked about.
So instead of being like, hey, you did this wrong,
Yeah, more like, hey, when this happened, I felt hurt. Can we talk about it?
and this is where that active listening comes in, right?
Yeah.
Really trying to understand their side of the story.
Because their actions, they might be coming from their own past, their own insecurities.
We all have our baggage.
And sometimes just having that open conversation, it can actually bring you closer.
It's like clearing the air, letting fresh air circulate.
Exactly. And if boundaries were crossed, well, now's the time to reinforce them.
Like, it's super important to me that we communicate openly. Going forward, I need you to respect that.
Okay, so what about forgiveness? Where does that fit in?
Forgiveness, it's like the healing balm for those trust wounds.
But it's not about condoning the behavior, right?
Right. It's about letting go of that anger, the resentment, the stuff that can poison a relationship.
It's like choosing to put down a heavy weight you've been carrying around.
But the episode, they also warned about using forgiveness as a Band-Aid.
Like a quick fix.
Yeah. They stressed that you got to address those deeper issues
The things that actually LED to the broken trust.
and be willing to learn and grow from it together.
It's like taking those broken pieces and creating something even stronger.
Because honestly, all relationships face challenges. It's inevitable.
The key is having the tools and the skills to navigate those rough waters together,
And that's what we've been exploring in this deep dive.
equipping you with the tools to build strong, trustworthy relationships.
Because it's an investment, right?
Mhm.
One that pays off in so many ways.
So go out there and cultivate those amazing connections. And that brings us to the end of another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.